Okay, we'll call the meeting to order. Take a roll call.
Representative Andrew. Representative Brown.
Here.
Representative Connolly. Representative Harshman.
Here.
Representative Nyman.
Here.
Representative Newsom. Representative Overmuller.
Here.
Representative Summers.
Excused.
Chairman Paxton.
Here. Representative Summers is presenting a bill in another committee, but he'll join us if he has the time to do so. Welcome to everyone. We are on a Friday and we have a light lift, I think, today. We only have one bill to consider. We're looking at House Bill 31, Wyoming's Tomorrow Scholarship. And I'm going to turn the explanation of that bill over to Representative Harshman.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, House Bill 31 is a product of, as you all know, our joint committee and 2.5 years of task force work and people around the state. Really, it's a concept that is being used in most of our sister states. We're one of the last states to adopt a program like this. So we worked with numerous stakeholders, obviously community colleges, university, our CTE programs around the state, the Attainment Council folks. And so anyway, we've, I think, come to it's been a lot of work into it and days and days of meetings. So I think we're in a pretty good spot. And I'll just quickly walk through the bill. It is basically an adult retraining scholarship for folks who are 24 years of age and older. So, Mr. Chairman, with that, walk through the bill. Definitions start on page 2 and 3. And then as you flip over to page 4, it really starts setting out the makeup of the account. It's an endowment fund that will generate interest and earnings that will then fund these scholarships. So this is not an appropriation from the general fund every year. We want to, similar to the Hathaway. I think in Wyoming, we're really good at this. And I think so we've followed that pattern. And on page 4 and 5, it sets up an expenditure account very similar to what we've just approved for the changes in the Hathaway, with one account at a 9% level that'll provide real stability. And we don't have this right pocket, the left pocket, and sweeping accounts at the end of the fiscal year. So that change we've incorporated into this and modernized that. So those are in that section of the bill. You flip over to page 8, it talks about the eligibility requirements. We've really reduced a lot of these, frankly. And I think the body down the hall was very interested in reducing many of the requirements that the House passed this bill, as you recall, last year. And so some of that's been shrunk down a little bit. I think the main thing is, you're a Wyoming citizen, you've registered for Department of Workforce Services, because there's other programs that we want to pull this together to make it a strong kind of system. And you have to be on top of page 9, 24 years old, residencies on page 8. You filled out your FAFSA, the Federal Student Aid application, that's on line 5. You register with Workforce Services, line 10. And you're not eligible for other scholarships under this article, and you're not receiving the Hathaway scholarship. Okay. So then as you flip over, Mr. Chairman, spells out the scholarship, really anybody meeting that criteria, bottom of page 10 and going over to page 11, and it spells out, and we've gone to this per credit hour up to $1,800 per academic term. And so really we're talking about 4 academic terms. And so you can see the maximum on line 17, $7,200. Okay, so that's the maximum award possible over 2 years or 4 academic terms. And then, Mr. Chairman, as you flip over to page 12, some of these same requirements to continue to hold that and be eligible for this scholarship is making satisfactory progress, the GPA component to it, and continuous enrollment. And I think that, and then, Mr. Chairman, page 13, section 1905 of this, the administration and rules, and how the scholarships are paid out. That continues on through 14 and 15. And then 17 talks about, this is not an entitlement. If the funds fall short and we can't meet this requirement, it gives administrators the ability to reduce these scholarships. It's not an entitlement. And that continues over on page 18 under legislative oversight and authority. Nothing in this article is construed to constitute an entitlement to a scholarship. And that's pretty standard boilerplate language. Okay, and then, Mr. Chairman, the funding of the scholarships on page 19. And when we ran the Hathaway amendments to the Constitution, we're allowed now in the Constitution to set up permanent endowments for scholarships under that Article 15, Section 20. And that's where this endowment is set up under the Constitution. Okay, and none of these scholarships, this program will not kick into gear until this endowment reaches 50 million. So, Mr. Chairman, then if you flip over in members over to page 20, more information really on investments, and then let me think. I think there's some more eligibility requirements on the bottom of page 21. And then finally, Mr. Chairman, I think the funding piece, as you head over to this section 3, we have $1,000 in this bill. And you remember the good co-chair, your good co-chair's suggestion that we just start with $1,000 and let this work through the legislative process. We know we're going to need at least 50 million to get to that point to start. The goal was going to be to get to 100 million and let that thing grow. And then really focus it then, Wyoming is pretty unique. We've got the highest percentage of citizens with high school diploma. We currently have one of the highest or best graduation rates in the United States, number 1 or number 2. It's really incredible. And of course, you look at our NAEP scores, 4th and 8th graders. I mean, we're in the top 3 or 4. Our community colleges it's remarkable what we're doing. And so, but there's a pretty significant percentage of Wyomingites that don't have any other additional training after high school. Frankly, we've been able to get very good jobs in the energy industry and support a family. And so as those things are changing a little bit, this whole workforce thing, and I think you'll have people here to talk about the workforce issue, and every state is facing this. Not as much, frankly, as Wyoming. We have a growing problem with the shrinking solution. And I think we're going to need all hands on deck. And I think you'll hear from industry that supports this bill. This will be one of the most important tools in the toolbox. And so with that, I just, again, Mr. Chairman, appreciate all the committee's work on this, all of the citizens' work across the state. We've met all across the state, and appreciate everybody who's worked so hard at this. So with that, I think I'll quit.
Okay, thank you. Comments or questions from the committee? Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As we were looking at this for introduction, one of our colleagues asked about on page 12, line 1, make satisfactory academic progress and what that means. And I'm wondering if we need to define that somehow, or if we let that be defined through rules, or how we want to ascertain if somebody is making satisfactory academic progress. And it says at least 2/3 of the attempted semester hours. And it was brought up if they drop some credit hours, if they fail, and certainly in Romanet 2, it says the cumulative grade point average of 2.0, but then the whole satisfactory academic progress. So I'm wondering if we want to address that and how that might be addressed. Thank you.
You want to weigh in on that?
Sure. Mr. Chairman, and if you flip back, members, to page 11, and really this starts under paragraph C, to remain eligible for the scholarship under this section, the student shall, and then it takes you over to page 12. And you have all these Romanettes. 1, make satisfactory progress. 2/3, yes, of those attempted. Now, every institution will have an add drop date, but once that date's passed, those are the hours attempted. So that's locked in. Number 2 is the GPA, as you mentioned. I think number 3 is really important too, that folks don't read far enough into that. Also, what your institution says. And it's really the same thing really with the Hathaway. You've got to meet this progress that the institution requires as well. And then 4, continuous enrollment. And then 5, they're going to be in, or excuse me, that's 4. And then it goes to paragraph D that you're ineligible if you don't meet all the requirements of C. So I think there's really 4 things we've listed out there that cover that. And I don't know, anybody else have anything to add to that, Chairman?
Yes, Representative Colley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I think there are folks, the community college folks might want to weigh in on this as well. But honestly, when I saw this definition, and if you remember yesterday, there was a question and a bit of debate about what satisfactory academic progress meant in a previous bill. And honestly, I think that we should be consistent between the bills with the same definition. And honestly, this one is a better one. The successful completion of 2/3 of attempted credit hours. And I guess Dr. Caldwell might weigh in, but this is a better definition than what was in the previous bill. And let's just get them to line up together.
Representative Brown.
Not me.
Oh, not you? I thought you had your hand up.
Nope, I was trying to get you over here to
Oh,
Sandy earlier. So
oh, okay. All right. Anyone else on the committee wish to comment? Have any questions? Did you get your bill presented over there, did you? All right, good deal. All right, we're going to open public comment. So anyone who would like to comment on this bill, please come forward. Identify yourself and tell us who you represent, please.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Erin Taylor, and I'm here representing the Wyoming Association of Community College Trustees. And I'm not going to take a ton of time. I just do want to echo a little bit of what you heard from Representative Harshman. A lot of elbow grease into this, a lot of working with the concerns that we heard with our folks, your colleagues down the hallway, to alleviate concerns, line things up, put a fine point on the details that maybe hadn't been quite worked out all the way. And so what you have before you, I think, is a really good product of all of that hard work. And so obviously we do support the bill. But I brought with me Dr. Caldwell today, who's the executive director of the Community College Commission, to just give you a little bit more information, because you've heard from us, that we support this, but to add something new, we just have a little bit of a follow-up on some programs that are out there that are like this in Wyoming as kind of a pilot, and how successful they are. So I thought she could give a few comments on that, Mr. Chairman, with your pleasure.
Welcome, Dr. Caldwell.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm Sandy Caldwell. I'm the Executive Director of the Wyoming Community College Commission. And to clarify one point that had to do with the satisfactory academic progress, this does also meet the federal definition. So what Representative Connolly was talking about, there is a term of art around what is called satisfactory academic progress. That is actually an action that is taken at the institutions at the end of every semester related to financial aid requirements. So the strengthened, I would say, definition, as you heard Representative Harshman and Representative Connolly talked about, the language in this bill is strong and also meets the satisfactory academic progress for the institution. So if that's helpful, it covers it in 2 ways, which is, I think I would say, a good thing. I won't belabor the point of this bill. This is one that's been in the works for a long time. I do want to share a little bit. You have heard before from Laramie County Community College. Dr. Schaefer has shared about the LCCC Reconnected. It has been extremely successful. I will tell you, the students who have progressed through this program, that program, have actually had a higher than the traditional student body retention and completion. I don't have those numbers right off the top of my head, but it is significantly higher than the traditional student body. What I do want to share with you is a program that launched last year by the L. Bogan Foundation. They did move forward with an L. Bogan grant for the community colleges targeted on this very population, knowing there was more work to be done. I don't have the compiled data across the institutions, but I do have a very specific example from Western Wyoming Community College that I think is very representative of the 7 community colleges. We have 8 community college districts. Gillette Community College, of course, is still under the Northern Wyoming Community College District, but the data from Western is very promising. I will tell you that the average, they had way more students apply than funds that they had. I will tell you that. They were able to award 13 students. They had 104 eligible applicants. It is significant. The age of the students, the average age is almost 35 years of age, the youngest being 24, the oldest being 59. And these were absolutely students who were seeking, they live in our communities and they are looking for that next opportunity in their career. Very successful. All of the students that were awarded did successfully move from the fall semester to the spring semester. And there were a couple that were entry in the spring semester that were awarded in the fall. Very successful. They did draw from the service area. And that's what I also wanted to share is it is Wyoming adults and living in our Wyoming communities that did take advantage. They did have an out-of-state, I believe, applicant. However, the funded students were from I'm verifying. Yes, all of them were from one of our Wyoming communities in the Southwest Wyoming service area for Western. Very successful.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And thank you for that information. Can you get us a one pager on that has that information? So when we go to the floor, we can be accurate in what we say. That would be great.
Chairman, Representative Summers. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
And Mr. Chairman, finally, I would just point to, I did give you a little handout if you want some talking points for your colleagues. And the other thing that is new, that's just a little bit different to offer is the last page. You see all these supporters from industry. This is a really broad group of folks, many of whom are behind me and probably want to talk about the impact that this could have on their workforce. And we have also advised folks not to take too much time. So, but they're here, they're strong. If they're not here, they're listed and they're in strong support. Mr. Chairman, thank you for the
Okay, thank you.
opportunity.
Representative Summers.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And in that one pager, please put how much the Elbogen donated. And, because we do have it in here and we did represent on the floor that, potentially there could be private partners in this. And so that would be one thing I'd ask. And then my biggest question though is, so Aaron, how much money can you sell on the floor if we put it in the bill?
Is that
Put you on the
And that's,
spot.
you've been talking to legislators and people, and I think obviously I would like to put some of our general fund money that's, 680 million in the bra, and certainly I think this is a great program, but what's realistic, do you think?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Summers, that's a great question. And for a lot of folks, that price tag stopped it dead in the water, in past years. What I'm hearing, and I've sat through all of that appropriations process, I've been visiting with folks across the floors. I'm hearing in the 30 to 50 space for this year is where folks are comfortable. I think if it's north of that, I think it's not moving anywhere. That would be my sense, but this is just my, hallway conversations. Yeah.
Thank you for sticking your neck out there a bit. Yes, Representative, hold on just a second. Representative Conley, did you have a question for them?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. More of a comment based on what Dr. Caldwell said, and then actually Representative Summers. And it's, again, in case they're listening, is the Elbogen Foundation that, saw an opportunity for an experiment, honestly, that could or maybe wouldn't move the needle a bit, and decided to invest in that program, in several programs. And just a thank you, a shout out and a thank you to them.
Yep. Anyone else? Questions? Okay. Anyone else like to testify? Yes, please come forward. State your name and who you represent, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Tony Decklever. I represent the Wyoming Nurses Association. And we are struggling, as most people know. It's a nationwide problem with nurses and trying to get nurses into the profession. Years ago, the legislative body created the Wyoming Investment in Nursing Program, and money was set aside for faculty in order to train nurse or for the faculty to teach nurses. And then there was a section that was scholarship money for students wanting to go into the profession. With the budget cuts a few years ago, the student loan side of that fund was cut. And so now there is no financial aid specifically for nurses. We have our association is divided up into regions, and the central region, they took some of their own personal money, developed a scholarship fund, and they had enough money to give one scholarship. 76 students applied for one scholarship because there's just nothing out there. And many of our people that are in our communities are looking at this as a good profession to go into right now, but it takes a while to become a nurse. And so to have some financial aid for some of these folks would be very beneficial. So the Nurses Association stands in support of this legislation.
Questions, comments? Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hi, Tony. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Question for you, especially right now with nursing in particular. Now, I'm not underneath any assumption that this will continue for the next 2, 4, 6 years or whatever, but it's the opportunity for nurses to especially find life-altering money outside of the state of Wyoming right now through traveling nurse programs where they can just pick up and leave. One of the things we're trying to do is attract people to stay here and find what they're doing. So one of my questions is what kind of message does this send if we're going to allow nurses opt into this program, we train them, and then they pop out and just go take off somewhere else? Would you support, or do you support any type of a residency requirement after? That was contemplated during the interim. Ultimately, it never made it back in here, but is that something that, the Nurses Association would support?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Brown, the Wyoming Investment in Nursing Program, when the student loan piece was there was a provision in there that nurses would stay in the state to work off the loan. And that actually was very beneficial because they would establish roots, they would get a job, they would stay in the state, and then overall, the majority of them would stay in the state. So that's a good program, absolutely. Travelers right now, and again, it's all in the news, and nurses are being paid exorbitant amount of money to travel, but that's temporary. That's not going to last. And many folks will have to go back to a home base of some sort. So it's interesting because travelers, the people that are going into traveling nursing right now, for the most part, they're young, uncommitted, they don't have any reason to stay. They don't have a family, they don't have roots. And so it's easy for them to travel. But we still have many, many, many loyal nurses that want to stay in this state and people that want to go into the profession and want to stay in this state. So yes, to answer your question, I think the Nursing Association would definitely support a buyback program of some sort or a loan repayment in lieu of work program. Absolutely. Because that was what part of WIN was, and we supported that.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, thank you for your
Thank you.
testimony. Yes, come forward, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm Rob Hill. I'm the Public Policy Director for the Wyoming Association of Career and Technical Education. With me is our Board of Directors here, strongly in support of the Wyoming's Tomorrow Scholarship. Briefly, I wanted to let the committee know that we work very closely with business and industry, and we frequently hear of the depleted workforce that we have, and organizations have to turn work down because they can't man jobs, and many times that work goes out of state. So anything that addresses a skilled, prepared workforce that's homegrown here in Wyoming, I think that's very beneficial to the state and our business partners. So briefly, wanted to express our support and our business partners' support, and be happy to stand for any questions.
Any questions for Rob?
Oh, just, Chairman.
Go ahead.
So, Mr. Chairman, if we put some money in this, are you going to come into the House lobby in there and help us get this through if we do?
Mr. Chairman and Representative Summers, absolutely.
All right. Anyone else? Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have this curiosity question that has just been nagging at me, and you're the guy to ask, and probably many of you in here would be. Do we exacerbate the problems that business owners are having right now by not being able to find employees, to even part-time employees, by providing money, maybe more money than what is they need, to a lot of young people that are saying, well, I don't really need to work or find another job because I've got, to college scholarships and things like that. I'm just curious. I mean, I don't want to have anybody's hair burst into flames here, but I'm just curious. Have we kind of, because I see a lot of help wanted signs around.
Sure.
And I see a lot of young people that are and maybe not engaged in working. And can we hit a point at some point where we offer enough free money that we kind of reduce the drive to get out and maybe start taking some of these jobs to help offset their financial needs and things like that? I mean, that was not out of the question, to be paying off loans and to be working in places and stuff like that. Can we ever get to the point where we can just give away too much money and lower and find more and more businesses struggling to find employees, even part-time employees? Just curious what your thought would be on that.
Mr. Chairman and Representative Nyman, I think the way we look at funding for career and technical education is when it's targeted specifically, we see it utilized the best. So when it gets to that point, that's a tough question. I don't know to answer here. I think there could be a tipping point. I don't know what it is, but I think our biggest issue is making this seamless transition from our educational entities into workforce. We have a gap there that's often lost. And when we target that area there, I think we get the most bang for our buck with these scholarships. So, from a finite number, I don't know what that would be, but I'm sure it exists, I would say.
Okay, anyone else? All right,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
you bet. Anyone else like to testify? Yes. Welcome.
Welcome, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Cindy Delancey, and I am with the Wyoming Business Alliance. I stand before you today in strong support on behalf of my over 400 members from multiple industries. This is our highest legislative priority for this session, and we really appreciate all the hard work done by this committee, so many of the individual legislators on it, the excellent work done by Dr. Caldwell and Ms. Taylor, and so many along the way. And I know you've received a handout from us as far as those that support this concept, and many couldn't be here today. But when you look at that cast of characters, including, industry leaders from the mining sector, the oil and gas sector, the trucking sector, the stock growers, the telecom, the utilities, the truckers, and the construction sector, we're all together on this. We've reached a point where we have to do something to help not only our young people, but our folks that are maybe non-traditional students that would like to go back to increase their earning capacity, to get the skills necessary, maybe to become a manager, or to just increase their skills to make them accessible to have other employment opportunities and get back to work, exactly as Representative Nyman was saying. People, we have so many vacancies, and this is the best tool in our toolbox to partner with higher education to get Wyoming people in Wyoming jobs. So we just appreciate all the work. This has been ongoing for many, many years. We've spent tons of hours Thank you, Representative Conley, for your vision, and as well as Representative Harshman's work and so many others, as that we think that we finally have a product that the cake is baked and ready to come out of the oven. So we look forward to working with you, continuing to move this on, discussions with your colleagues, finding that right amount of resource. We're very committed to finding that right dollar amount, and we stand at the ready to be able to help this committee in any way we can to try to come up with some solutions to our workforce dilemmas. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Questions or comments from the committee?
Have a nice
Okay,
weekend. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to testify? Anyone else? Going once? Going twice? Do we have anyone online? Okay, no one online. What's the pleasure of the committee?
Move the bill, Mr. Chairman.
Moved. Is there a second? Moved and seconded.
We're talking about dollars.
Oh. A little distracted, are you? All right, committee. Guess we can,
Do we want to walk through the bill or do we want to just take?
well, that's what I'm gonna find out here. I think Representative Harshman did a pretty good job of walking everyone through the bill, but we can walk through it page by page if you'd like to offer any amendments or comments, but or we can forego that and just ask for general questions or comments or amendments on it. And yes, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, just a quick question. This bill does have an appropriation $1,000, so
Yes.
it'll be re-referred
It'll have to
to
be re-referred.
appropriations.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Just say if anybody has any questions, let's do it that way.
Any questions? Yes, go ahead.
If you wouldn't mind, I'd like to ask Ms. Caldwell a couple questions and maybe Ms. Taylor in regards to, and yeah, they can come on up.
Yeah, come on up, please. See, you just thought you were out of the hot seat there.
Oh, this isn't bad. I'm just clearing up stuff for me. What percent, and I looked over some of these figures here, but in comparison, what percent of the folks that you forecast or have seen based on the information that we're going to get to look at that Ms. Caldwell has, what percent of the folks that take on a scholarship like this that enter college later in life, 24 years old or even, after normal, what percent of them finish to a completed either degree or a certification versus even the Hathaway, even somebody that's leaving high school and going the Hathaway? I think that number's at 50% or less. What percent do you foresee this affecting and getting a degree and finishing with these dollars?
Who'd
Mr.
like to answer
Chairman?
that? Go ahead.
Representative Nyman, I don't have that off the top of my head, but I can get that data for you. So we have two different mechanisms through which we can get that data for you. We actually have the success of the Laramie County Community College Reconnect program. It's been more successful than the traditional student. So I will get that data for you. And then I will also get the data that's available on the parallel programs in other states. Again, they have seen this similar outcome, is that the adult learners tend to complete at a higher rate and are more likely to stay within the state. I will try to get that and make sure that I have that on the page that Representative Summers asked for.
I would appreciate that. And follow up, Mr. Chairman. My heartburn in this is a little bit, and I actually discussed this with another representative, and it was kind of talked about briefly, is the fact that sometimes we invest these dollars in students that then take those dollars and that education, they go out of state. I had talked to a couple of different legislators about the potential of trying to put some kind of like what the Nurses Association was talking about there, work that off, work a percentage of it off to a match or whatever, to make sure that we're not just, folks can come in the state, work here or live here for a year, get an education or change their degree and do something else and then leave. What problem was relayed to me is that the follow-up is the issue. If somebody decides to leave, and how do you repay it if they don't stay in the state and stuff like that? Is there a way that, in your suggestion, and I'll be quite honest with you, I prefer this. I like this. I voted for this. I didn't vote for it on introduction, but I do like this because I believe these are dollars well spent. If we're going to spend money like this, I do appreciate it. But what is there out there that a person could do to make some sideboards or something to make sure that we're not educating kids outside the state that don't come into here except for 365 days. Now you qualify and then you get your degree or your education and then take that investment that Wyoming just made in you somewhere else. I mean, is it wrongheaded to think of that we should be expecting these young people or these adults to make sure that they try to at least stay in here for a year, 2 years and employment and do a reimburse? This is just food for thought. And I don't want anybody to start having a conniption here, but I mean, it's just what a reimburse. If you stayed here for 2 years, we'll reimburse you fully for your education. Is that something that's realistic or is that just too much dragging around trying to find people later and it's not feasible or even wise?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Nyman, I will answer that as best I can. I'm not sure that'd be appropriate for me to have an opinion on that. I would tell you that is a policy decision. But what I will say is that we do have that for the WIN student grant. And we do have students who are in repayment. It is much lower than the number of nursing students who stay in the state. That is a net increase to the state in the nurses that we do have actively employed in the state versus in repayment. What I will tell you is that the adult population, as seen in other states, and I think the Tennessee adult grant, and actually the one in West Virginia as well, do see that their adult population stays a majority. And I think it is a significant majority. I'll get that data for you, but because they are already in the state, they're already in the communities, they are committed to completing because it advances their family. Many of them are homeowners or that's where their entire family network is. So they do have a much higher, what's called stickiness to stay in a state. And that is what has been predominantly seen in the other states where they have these programs.
Go ahead, Aaron.
Mr. Chairman and Representative Nyman, also something I'd like the committee to think about too is how this is a building block that we are adding to some other blocks that Wyoming's put together on how we look at not just higher education, but how we're trying to really build our economy moving forward. And some of that had to do with the Applied Baccalaureate degree that we passed a couple of years ago, back when you were still in the Jonah building, how we're thinking about, the Hathaway and all the conversations around that. Some of the more forward-looking economies around in our sister states. I won't say the word fastest growing because that's just different, but more forward growing, where I think Wyoming's trying to get, they have these sorts of tools available to them. And so this is something that is a building block to bring us to that space of where does Wyoming want to be in the future?
Don't the community colleges all have a placement office where they actually help place these kids or offer opportunities for that? And I think that, if a person is seeking a degree or a certification or something in the business community, there's a shortage of that in the business community. They're going to come after them. And I think that makes them stay in the state. I know that we have such a shortage of teachers right now that I have a granddaughter that's student teaching in a school in Wyoming, and just barely into her student teaching, she's already been offered a job. So, I mean, that's what happens. I think if there are people out there offering those jobs, the folks will stay in the state of Wyoming, just my opinion. Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Not necessarily a question for this. This is more public comment. And I would just state, looking at this through just a slightly different lens, that if I'm going to pay somebody $7,200 to move to Wyoming to become educated and stay here and become part of the workforce, I'm all in. $7,200 to get somebody to move here. If that's what it takes to bring an educated workforce to Wyoming, to where we have employers that are looking to move here because we have an educated workforce, I'll write a check for $7,200 to get as many people here as I possibly can to get them educated and ready to go so we can start attracting more companies here.
Representative Harsh.
It's I really appreciate Representative Brown. First of all, I was going to talk that to add to your answer, remember the bill we passed last year out of the House had much more stringent requirements. We had longer residency requirements and a work or payback provision. But our colleagues down the hall didn't want that. And so this is where we retreated from that a little bit. But Representative Brown, what you just said, it takes me back to the old Merit Scholarship Committee on the Hathaway. And that exact question was brought up. Well, what if somebody moves here, their kid's a senior in high school just to graduate to get the Hathaway? And Senator Scott, there were 4 of us on that committee, 4 legislators, Senator Wasserberger, Scott, myself, and Tex Boggs, who is president of Western Wyoming. And Senator Scott said, you know, if somebody moves here so their kid can get the Hathaway and go to higher ed, it's probably not the worst thing that ever happened. And so it's interesting how, you know, all these years later, and you were probably a little kid and running around on your trike. And yeah, so I mean, it's interesting, the conversation, but so I guess it just reminds me, I mean, all these debates we have over everything, whether it's water or justice or these things have been going on forever and they're going to keep going on. So it's really, really appreciate it. So it's really good. Thank you.
Okay, other comments, questions? Anything else from the committee before we? Yes.
You can vote against. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move on page 22, section 3 on the dollars. I would like to change.
The bill's been
moved. We're on the amendment stage. So I would like to change the 1,000 to 50 million general fund.
Okay, you've heard the amendment. Any comments, questions from the
Is there a
committee?
second?
You have a second? Oh, yeah.
And then,
Representative Brown seconded.
Mr. Chairman, just a bit to comment on it.
Go ahead.
You know, I think this is a really good opportunity and time to utilize some of the money that we have, call it surplus dollars, to do really forward-thinking projects in Wyoming. And I think this is very forward-thinking. The reason I picked 50 million is it's just the trigger we have in the bill when you can institute a scholarship. So that's kind of my thoughts, and we'll probably get trimmed along the way, but that was my motion.
Okay, questions, comments from the committee? Yes, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I would have to stand against this amendment. I mean, I haven't been in here that long, but I remember 18 months ago, we cut over $400 million out of our state budget in an effort to live within our means. I know that it looks really flush right now, but I would feel much better about what we're doing here, that we use this thing as it fills. I mean, that's a great idea, but boy, I would really struggle with that right now based on the history we've just seen, enough peaks and valleys. And so I would have to stand against that amendment.
Mueller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also have to vote against it. The excess money right now, according to the latest profile, resides in the LSRA, not the general fund. So it's not sitting there waiting to be spent on anything as it exists on the profile from a couple of days ago.
Mr. Chairman, I think there's a lot of ways to get here. I think what the majority floor leader and former appropriations member, it's trying to find the right path forward where you don't have, and there's probably a couple ways to do this. The way we did the Hathaway, we put 100 million in to start, and then we put in a provision on investment returns reaching a certain level, and we tipped it over a period of a couple of years to get to 400 million. That was the goal, and it took a couple of years then and we got to that point. I think absolutely the money's there, and this appropriation out of the general fund then will come from the budget reserve account, and there 640 million, as I talked about in the amendment yesterday, in the budget reserve account, that at the end of this budget, 2 years, if this budget goes through, will sweep to the legislative stabilization reserve account. And so I think, yeah, it's not about the money. The general fund is the appropriate place, in my opinion, to appropriate it from. My question is, about what we're all thinking about. Is that the sweet spot? Is it 15 million, 30 million? Is it 50? I don't know. So that's the thing that concerns me about this. I don't want to, I don't want to have this be used against all the work we've done when I know we can get there somehow. But anyway, I'll probably support it, but I'm going to keep working on this.
Okay, Representative Conley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I too will support it. And honestly, it really is, as others have just talked about, it's what's the path forward from this committee? Let's face it, I think all of us, really love the bill, and I think all of us love the vision of the bill, and most of us love the way it's been operationalized. It's been worked hard. So the one issue is that $1,000 placeholder. The path forward during the interim was, let's use $1,000 to get it to the floor, get it to committee. And I'm going to just thank Ms. Taylor for the work that she's been doing in order to get us to understand what is that sweet spot figure as we go forward. She gave us the number, and I implicitly trust her discussions. And she's telling us that that figure is $30 to $50 million. Okay. So it seems to me that the good majority floor leader has used that top figure, that 50 million. And that makes sense to me, because as many of us are former appropriators and we know this appropriation committee, we know that they're never going to add. And so the expectation could be they'll start with that 50 million and they'll bring it down a bit. And that's where that sweet spot will be. I too agree with the good former speaker about the money. And in all honesty, that will be done with budget balancers in the Section 300 of the budget ultimately, is what I think. And so I am less concerned about it coming out of the general fund here and about the LISRA backup, because again, the budget balancers in the Section 300s will take care of it. I also think that this is the time to do it. And so on and in favor.
Anyone else? Well, I'm afraid I'm going to have to push back a little bit. I think for me, the main issue is to get the bill passed. And I'm afraid that 50 million may be the killer, the poison pill that kills the bill. I think, as Representative Harshman mentioned, there's other ways of getting that money in there. And if we can get it passed, then I think then we work on how we're going to get the endowment funded. But for me, I want to get it passed first. So I'm probably going to be a no. Anyone else? Okay, sensing you're ready to vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no? No. Noes have it. Unless you want a division. Okay, back on the bill.
So, Mr. Chairman, I have a question for you, if that's okay.
Sure, go ahead.
In relation to the same kind of amendment and that language of finding a sweet spot. So my question to you is the $1,000 placeholder where you'd like us to send it to appropriations with, or are we looking at a different figure, that 15 million or $30 million figure to send it to appropriations? So I am curious about your thoughts.
That was a number that came out of the Joint Education Committee. And for me, I would prefer just to stick with that. And I think there's a lot of work to be done behind the scenes with the Appropriations Committee and other interested parties to figure out a strategy for moving this forward. But since it's a joint appropriation, the number kind of came out of that group. And I wouldn't be entirely resistant to it, but I do kind of question that.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, just to clarify, so your preference is to keep it at the 1,000 and bring it to appropriations with that placeholder?
Yes.
And actually have the discussion with appropriations and have them do a standing committee amendment with a dollar figure?
Yes.
Okay.
But I'm just one person. So. All right. Anyone else would like to weigh in? All right.
Question on the bill.
Ready for the question? Roll call.
Representative Andrew, Representative Brown, Representative Connolly, Representative Harshman, Representative Nyman, Representative Newsom, Representative Obermuller, Representative Summers, Chairman Paxton,
Aye.
9 ayes.
Okay. Motion carries. Just one thing we might be thinking about, I think we all got notification on interim topics to take a look at. I've got a couple for sure that I'd like to take a look at. One of them, since we have a community college folks here, is that the community college funding issue, I think, needs to be explored during the interim. I'd sure like to see that. And then we hear from a lot of districts, there issues with recruiting and retaining teachers. And so that's one of my items that I'd like, and certainly open to anyone else. If you have a suggestion, please write it down, bring it to me in some form so that we have that. And we've got a little while before we have to turn those in, but certainly like to have you thinking about it right now. So, all right, any other business to come before the committee? All right, meeting is adjourned.